Welcome back to another episode of Trip Report. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about a 6 gram penis envy mushroom experience that I had. And this experience was, without a doubt, the most difficult mushroom experience I've had in my entire life, and easily the top two most difficult, just psychedelic in general, experiences that I've had in my entire life. So much so that I took a 2 year break completely off of psychedelics after this experience because it scared me so much. Since my 4 gram death experience that I had talked about in a previous episode, the 3 gram plus range of mushrooms had this weird tendency just to get away from me. I mean, I'm not sure why, but it was almost inevitable that I would fall into that thought loop of like, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not welcome here. And then that would transition into you consumed poison, you've died, you've transitioned to another realm, you can no longer get back to the life you were living. Just all of those difficult things to wrap my brain around. Now, I had a great experience with my brother Mark when he was out here visiting, and we talked a lot about a lot of deep stuff and, got in some good work and had a lot of laughs. But then out of nowhere, I got this like, oh shit, we're both dead. And I don't know how to tell him feeling. And I had felt like if I told him and he realized it, that he would just start freaking out and it would ruin that good moment that we were both enjoying. And as we continued to experience the trip, I quickly got in my own head and I was unable to focus on our interaction because I knew that sooner or later I would have to explain to him, like, hey, we're both dead, man. And when I finally broke the news to him, he just laughed at me, realizing like my headspace was complete nonsense. And it took probably another hour or two until my brain could finally rationalize that we were both okay. But again, probably great that I had him there to kind of balance me out. I had a similar situation on the episode with Anthony where we talked about him drinking the blue juice, and the experience started well for all of us. I mean, it was heavier than normal, but it was only a matter of time until my brain changed on me again. And it was like, oh shit, I have to go tell these two guys that we've all died and there's no going back from here. And fortunately, my better half was up in the house and I was able to come up and talk to her and ground a little bit. But it still was just this weird place that my brain kept migrating to on these above 3 gram doses. So I'd come to the conclusion that the problem was probably that I hadn't taken enough. Like I felt like my ego was dying, but that the brain didn't have enough psilocybin in it to completely shut down that prefrontal cortex. So while my brain center was shutting off, I interpreted it as if I was dying. And I figured that like the 5 gram experience was so good because it was enough to force me through to the other side. So I'd often told people that like 4 grams is the worst dose because it leaves you stuck with 1 foot in this dimension and 1 foot in the other, and you can't really determine where you're at, and it's very difficult to navigate. I've also heard the quote before. I wish I remember who it was. I don't know if it was Terrence McKenna or somebody else, but they said that if you don't feel like you've died, you didn't take enough. So I figured it was time to break the cycle and get back to that hero dose and then hopefully purge this weird death loop out of my psyche. Now, having done 5 grams previously and gotten through to the other side, I knew that 5 grams did the trick, but it was still a bit of a sketchy process while I lost bodily control and was able to finally let go and transition to that realm. So I figured I would just bump it all the way up to 6 grams, and that should hopefully thrust me through to the other side without any chance for me to fight. And I figured I would do headphones, eye shades, put a heated vest on, have a puke bucket next to me, and I'd have a sober trip sitter in the house. Figured I'd be set up that nothing could go wrong because I was more than prepared for this experience to break through to the other side. At least that's what I had hoped. So going to my journal, my pre-journal entry stated, first experience of the new year. I've definitely been feeling the calling for another deep and powerful journey within. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't afraid of the 5 gram realm, even though it was hands down my best experience to date. If I'm going to preach no growth unless you get out of your comfort zone, I need to go there myself, and 6 grams is definitely out of my comfort zone. The things I need/hope to tackle today are finding the root cause of and hopefully repairing this autoimmune stuff. I wrote, let's get this body and mind back to 100% so that it can repair anything that's out of whack. Additionally, I need to be a friendlier person and more open to others around me, particularly the coworkers from the other crew. Not everyone has the work ethic that I do. In fact, most do not. This is why I will succeed when I focus on my own thing and quit working for others, but I shouldn't expect the same level of effort from my peers. I wrote, to all the powerful energy that's out there, God, the Creator, Mother Aya, whatever you prefer to be called, please watch over me and let's make this an enlightening experience. So this was on January 30th of 2020. So 3 years ago, like I said, beginning of the year, was ready to set the year off right. Sent 6 grams of penis envy mushrooms using the Lemon Tech cold extraction method. I laid down under the blanket with my heated vest on, eye shades down, and I started my playlist. The minor strength visions started to come in pretty quickly, and the music sounded a little more tuned in, but it was nothing like the 5-gram experience that I had had. You know, it wasn't the super deep, vivid, chrome-like visuals, and the music didn't sound super crazy. But almost immediately, my brain took that dark turn into the death loop. So after laying there and thinking about it, I was like, oh, this is getting away from me. So I ditched the eye shades, ditched the headphones, and I got up to see if my trip sitter could ground me. And she tried telling me everything that should console a rational person, but my brain was now plotting so hard against me that there was nothing she could say to help. I began to aimlessly wander about the house, trying to just rationalize the nonsense. I guess similar to the way that I was pacing on the 4-gram experience where I thought I had died, I was kind of in the same boat, like getting up, just moving about, trying to distract myself from this thought process of having died. She was studying for an exam in the office, but I think she finally realized that I wasn't doing okay. And so she relocated into the living room just to study there and was just sitting on the couch next to me. So she had pulled up a YouTube video that was like a 4K video of the ocean kind of coming in and coming out. And it was probably very peaceful to the average person. But when my ego came back in again, it said, you live so close to the beach, and for the past 16 years, you could have driven out to the coast and experienced this in person. But because you fucked up, you took too much of this thing you weren't supposed to consume, now you're dead and you're stuck in this purgatory realm where the only beach experience you're allowed to have is watching this bullshit TV version of it. So again, brain just plotting against me. And my eyelids were getting super heavy. And again, if I could have rationalized it the way that I had when I did the 5-gram experience, it was the message of your eyelids are heavy because you're supposed to close your eyes and you're supposed to go in there. But for some reason in my mind, I thought like as soon as I close my eyes and I let go of this world, I can't come back here anymore. So I was terrified to close my eyes and go in. Like I couldn't let go of this realm that I was in. So I ended up sliding over next to her on the couch and had asked her what she was studying. And she seemed kind of shocked by my interest in what she was looking into then, or what she was studying, or what she was prepping for. So she started to explain to me the medical jargon, which made absolutely no sense in the condition that I was in. And then as she was explaining to me, she was flipping back and forth on the stapled packet to kind of break down what she was explaining and then studying, so what she was learning at the same time. And that kicked me into another weird thought loop. So the thought loop was now, because I inserted myself into a conversation I didn't belong in, now my eternity, rather than just staring at an ocean on the TV, was going to be her attempting to explain something to me, but just flipping back and forth. So the thought, like the loop now was her brokenly not being able to explain to me, flipping back and forth in the packet. And I just couldn't focus on what she was saying and doing. But I still felt the need to be engaged. Like my mind was so far gone that I thought that if I stopped paying attention to her, she would just disappear. And then I was all alone in this purgatory. So I got up to go get a sip of water or something. And she ended up leaving the room. I don't know if she went to the restroom or back to the office to grab something else. But when I walked back out from getting the water, she was gone. And I looked down the hallway, didn't see her. I looked around the living room and dining room. There was no one there. I glanced out at the driveway and I saw her car parked there. And I thought, well, of course she's here because her car's in the driveway. And then my brain went to the next level of fuckery. And I started to believe that I was in like a Fight Club situation where my girlfriend wasn't real. She was just some figment of my imagination that I had made up. I thought that if I were to leave the house and go tell one of the neighbors that she was missing, they wouldn't have any idea who she was. And I would say to them, oh, you know, the girl who lives with me that drives the white Jetta. And they would look at me and confused and say, dude, that white Jetta is your car. You have a couple of cars. So I was just, realistically, full-blown psychosis at this point. And then out of nowhere, while I'm in this struggle, she reemerged in the hallway and I was just overcome with relief. I was like, oh, she's still here. Okay, this is good. And clearly she saw that I was struggling at this point. So she just called it on studying and was just doing whatever she could to try to put me at ease. So she suggested that we go outside and that maybe nature would help the situation. I would say I felt marginally better, but I was still struggling with maintaining my sanity. I thought, shit, if I didn't die, I can't navigate this world thinking this whole thing is an illusion like this. Like, how am I going to go to work on Monday and try to perform my normal work duties? I was like, well, I need her to now be my full-time caretaker in this weird state of psychosis. She can't come to work with me while I do my job and hold my hand. Like, she has work that she has to do herself. And then I glanced over and saw that she had tears in her eyes. I asked her what was wrong, and she replied nothing. And that sent me even deeper down the rabbit hole. Now I was stuck here with this simulation of a person that I wasn't willing to let go. But she was sad that I was holding on and couldn't let her go. And I glanced up at the security cameras in the house, and the psychosis went in this kind of stage of being in like a Truman Show scenario. It was like the mushroom was the Matrix red pill, and that I was now out of the Matrix in this bizarre reality, aware that I was being watched by these cameras around the house that I thought were there for security. All this stuff sounds just like what you would hear, a schizophrenic person say. So again, just in this bizarre state of psychosis. Now, I remember thinking, this is the worst place I've been mentally in my entire life, and I wouldn't wish this upon my worst enemy. And she had asked me, she was like, what are you thinking about? And I said, I don't think I can be a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist. She seemed shocked by the response, and I think maybe I was myself as I said it, but I explained that I couldn't willingly put anyone in this state that I was in because it was so difficult and so terrifying. And somewhere during that time outside, I must have explained to her about the mushroom being the forbidden fruit, and she assured me that I was battling some kind of Catholic guilt. Now, at the time, in that state of psychosis, I couldn't really wrap my head around what she was trying to tell me, but it later made a lot of sense that only someone who had grown up not indoctrinated into a religion could see the trauma that it caused somebody who was brainwashed in Catholic school. This was probably one of the biggest aha moments from that experience, but it took years to unpack, and I'll dive much deeper into that one following the next ayahuasca debacle. Fast forward, maybe enough time passed that my brain began to function a little more rationally, and either she or I decided it might be good for me to eat something. Again, one of us, probably her because I don't think I was in any space to operate a stove, made some bacon. I wasn't hungry, but I was really open to trying anything possible to snap myself back into reality. So I took a bite of the bacon, and I realized very quickly that I was still not okay. As I was chewing the bacon, again, my sense of time being way off, it was as if no matter how long I chewed the bacon, it wouldn't break down. And I certainly didn't enjoy the flavor either. But my new stupid thought loop was, great, now for the rest of eternity, I'm stuck chewing bacon and I'm stuck with this flavor forever. Not once thinking that I could just spit it out if I was unable to swallow it. I mean, straight up crazy person. Honestly, I can't remember if I swallowed it or spit it out, but clearly eating was out of the picture. Finally, she suggested it would probably be best to get the dogs out on a walk and actually be out in nature rather than just the backyard. No matter what I did here wasn't helping, so I was up for it. And so my brain went down a weird rabbit hole again. As I walked out the front door toward the car, I imagined a future where, in this made-up simulation, my significant other was going to be unable to drive. We were going to sit in the seats and she was going to look at me and say, I can't drive this thing. And I knew I was in no way, shape, or form capable of operating a motor vehicle. So I would have to decline and we would surrender back to the house where I was trapped for eternity. This would be another loop. And then different suggestions of how we could leave the house only to be shot down to have me return to this weird purgatory realm. So we go out, we sat in the car, she started it, put it in gear, and off we were. Holy shit, my brain was wrong. I was overwhelmingly excited, but confused at the same time. We headed toward the park, and ahead I could see some taillights because people were stopping for the light. And my brain projected the future again. It thought, she's not going to hit the brakes. How can she not see those taillights? We're going to smash into those cars. Yet, she eased on the brakes, we slowed down, no accident. Again, excited that my brain was wrong, but very confused. And then a block later, we drove by a water main break in the road on the way to the park. And I saw the crazy water flowing and the construction crew all around it. And I remember thinking, that wasn't real. What a weird thing to be in this simulation. And then we arrived at the park, leashed up the dogs, and went out on the walk. The earth was so bright and so colorful. I had started to see people in all directions just going about their day. And I started to think a little more rationally and realized that if my significant other was a figment of my imagination, she certainly couldn't have driven us to the park and been walking one of the dogs right now. And then all of the people and their individual lives around me couldn't simply be figments of my imagination. Surely, if I followed them to their cars and back to their homes, they were living their own individual lives. And over the next 30 minutes to an hour walking through the park, my brain slowly returned closer to baseline. It was hard to even think or rationalize the experiences that I was having only a few hours prior. It didn't make sense how the brain could operate so differently when the serotonin receptors were hijacked by psilocybin. Either way, I was so unbelievably grateful to have returned back to a state of normalcy. We got home, I could eat and swallow food again, I could drink water, all was well. The first thing I absolutely had to do was check the security cameras. We died laughing at my struggle watching it on the security cameras now that it was all a part of the past. That being said, that 6-gram experience was hands down the most stressful experience of my entire life. I mean, if you could combine all of the stress I experienced through boot camp, 2 Iraq tours, a divorce, losing my job, and you multiply that by 1,000,000, it wouldn't even have come close to my experience that day. I truly would not wish that experience on my own worst enemy. However, the biggest takeaway in these situations and why I think the near-death experiences are so powerful is because you truly appreciate how precious life is. When I thought everything had been taken away, it was so sad and so scary. And when I realized it was just a figment of my imagination, I was so much more grateful for everything that I have in this life. We are now 3 years past that experience. I was legitimately scared of mushrooms for a solid 2 years following this one. My next plant medicine journey wasn't until giving ayahuasca another go this past July, and honestly, that was probably just as terrible, but we'll go into that on the next episode. I reflect back on my statement of not wanting to be a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist, and that weighed on me for some time because for years I thought that might be my calling in life as all of these substances move out of Schedule 1 and go into therapeutic use. I truly believe I needed to go through that hell so that I can help others who find themselves there. Although terrible in the moment, that experience of death is what makes life so much more beautiful. While I certainly don't want anyone to go through that hell that I did, I want everyone to see the beauty of purely existing as a human being on this earth and what an opportunity life is. If it's necessary to go through the darkness before you can see the light, then I will be happy and honored to hold someone's hand through that transition. I think that's a great place to wrap this one up. All said and done, this really shows how beneficial it is to have a sober trip sitter on these high-dose experiences. I have no idea how far south this experience could have gone if I was home alone. The 4-gram experience alone was difficult enough, but this was so much more difficult than that one. If I could do it all over again, or somehow be there for myself as a trip sitter, I would have suggested to myself when I was on the couch with the heavy eyelids to surrender and let go. I think I would have held my own hand so that there was that sense of grounding and that I would know that I wouldn't disappear when the eyes closed. But I think there was a lot more to learn within if I was simply willing to surrender. Surrender is the most difficult but most important aspect of ego death, and certainly easier said than done. But if you find yourself in a higher dose situation where you're struggling to stay within this reality, just let go. As always, thank you for joining me. Love you guys.